Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer and Corey with Dr. Marketing Tips.
Hey guys.
And we are here today to talk about the role of storytelling in medical marketing.
Yeah, so first let's talk a little bit about some of the considerations that we just want to put out there. We've talked about it over the previous weeks multiple times that patients are now in the driver's seat and they kind of hold the power. And, there's real benefits in the patients telling their stories, just like there's benefits for a consumer, telling a story or leaving a review about a restaurant. I can think of right now, I'm looking for a new car, and I see the commercials all the time about advance this and safety that, but they all say that. But so the first thing I do is I go and I look for a review online, or I ask people that I know, and it's the same thing dealing with patients.
Yeah, and Corey's looking for a new car, and he's kind of a tech geek, and so he goes on to all the blogs and reads about them and sees what everyone's talking about. Whereas I just use social media to find out what other people are saying about their experiences. And a lot of times, I go with what a trusted friend or advisor recommends. And so, one thing that we consider as we talk about storytelling is that social media really does help facilitate storytelling. But as we said before, there's still people out there like Corey that like to get their reviews and, look at some long copy and look at what people are saying at all different kind of sources. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to discuss why it is that storytelling even matters. Then we're going to share with you how to use testimonials to attract more and actually better patients. We had Corey and I've had a long week this week, and we've met with a lot of our physician clients. And one of the common themes that I've been hearing is that the doctors have a lot of patients coming in, but they're not always the patients that they want. And so we're going to talk about using your testimonials to attract the kind of patients you actually want. And then we're going to share with you some simple things that you can do today to help your patients tell your story.
All right, so let's get started. So let's talk about patients as storytellers first. This is a concept that's called narrative medicine, and in a recent 2011 study, it was found that patients listening to other patients' stories, it can be therapeutic. But from a marketing standpoint, it also kind of lends trust and just a familiarity. That you can talk to someone that has gone through something they're going through, or they might go through when you're considering a surgery.
So trusted word of mouth is always the best source of advertising. And I was sharing a story with Corey earlier today about this Facebook group that's out there in my neighborhood. And it's one of these closed groups, but it has a couple thousand people. And I've kind of been sitting from the sidelines watching how the people in my neighborhood interact with one another. And literally we'll have people that will go on and say, hey, I'm looking for a new gynecologist. Anybody have any recommendations? And they'll get literally 30 different recommendations from 30 different people. And then one or two doctors will get mentioned, and then somebody will start chiming in about their experience with the doctors. And you can see it kind of unfolding right there on the computer about this word of mouth that is being passed around, and how people are selecting their physician based on what they believe to be their friends actually telling them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it kind of leads to the next slide here, and that through storytelling, many people gain insight that leads to behavioral change. Like Jen said, if you hear that, so-and-so is the best dentist in town and there's no pain, and, my teeth are whiter than they ever have been before, then, if your friend tells you that, it means so much more than if you heard a radio commercial or a print ad or something like that.
And this is really just why social is such a great tool for telling stories, whether you're the one telling your story in a kind of a canned format through a testimonial, or something you've gathered from a patient directly, or whether it's people that are out there telling your stories. The opportunity for a story to go viral using social media, we probably could give you 25 examples right now of when this happens. And it's just a matter of kind of hoping to control the message or get the message going in a specific direction, and then using social to let it kind of get its legs under it and start running.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to a rumor. It can be good or bad, but when that rumor spreads, all of a sudden, everybody kind of knows about it and they're talking about it. And if it's a positive one, that's the one that you want to get behind and really push to help create the patient identity and satisfaction that you're looking for. So let's share a little bit of stats about patients as storytellers. 78% of consumers trust peer recommendations, while only 14% trust advertisements. I would say that it's probably a little bit more than 14%, but it's just harder to establish that trust. Whereas, when you're talking about or talking to a peer, it's immediate. 70% of consumers prefer getting to know a company via articles and video rather than advertisements. And we'll talk in a second about short and long content and different types of video and articles and things you can do. But that's kind of the wave of the future, and it's here now. And finally, 92% of buyers regularly check reviews online before making purchase decisions. I'm definitely one of those.
I'll say this too. These aren't just statistics that we pulled out of the air. This is from a survey, I think, about a year ago that the inbound marketing agency HubSpot put together, and they did a pretty lengthy survey of consumer groups across the board and came up with this data. And everything that Corey and I have seen backs up this data. And I agree with him. Probably trusted advertisements probably a little higher than 14%. And it's uncanny how savvy buyers are becoming, and this applies to medical practices too, in terms of going and just kind of checking things out, kicking tires online prior to going out and making an appointment. So let's talk about telling your story. All right, so Corey kind of touched on it a little bit. So there's two types of content that we really focus on. There's long content, and there is short content. Now, Corey's out there shopping for a new car, and he's kind of a geek, and he likes the long content. He really dives into a very lengthy article that he is not able to read maybe in one sitting, whereas I find that I'm very short on time, and I'm more apt to take a look at shorter content, couple sentences long, and I will retain that information and then go with it. But you have to make sure that you provide the type of content that your potential patient is looking for, and that you have a myriad of options, so that depending on how much time they've got, it'll depend on what they're willing to invest in doing their research. So we use video and written testimonials quite often. We'll often go into a meeting with a patient who's had a positive experience, and we will sit down and shoot video with them. And then it's great because it's content that just keeps on giving, and we will take that video back to the office, render it, get it edited down, and then go in there and transcribe what's been said in the video, and then turn around and put it into a written testimonial as well.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what Jen was just saying about long content versus short content, and the ways that your patients want to consume it. Sometimes they might be able to click play and watch a video, and sometimes maybe they're at their office and there's some downtime, so they pop on real quick because they're wondering, and they can only read a paragraph or so. So the more ways that you can give them that content, the better. And I will say that we hear success stories all the time from videos and things like that. I mean, that's why we actually chose the image that's right there. If you can get your patient to do that and talk about how happy they are, then if you can video that, it does so much better than just writing it down in a few sentences.
I'll say this too. So when we do a video for a patient testimonial, sometimes it's just the patient talking about how their experience went, how quick their recovery time was for a particular surgery or something like that, how much they like the doctor, how much they like the staff, kind of their story. But when we take it into a long form written content, whether we just take the testimonial and literally transcribe it, or a lot of times we will write an article type of a story that explains a procedure or a surgery and explains it in depth, highlights the doctors at the particular practice that performed that procedure, and then use the testimonial from the patient to intersperse throughout it. So we sometimes will take that video and use it to generate long content that then becomes evergreen and just helps bringing more and more patients to the office. And if you do it right, your patients will tell the story for you. If you have a good experience and you actually tell them that you want them to share the experience, then they will do this job for you. It's just a matter of building that rapport. All right, so one quick tip, and this is often so overlooked, but plain and simple, if you want your patients to tell your story, you've got to identify who those patients are And you got to ask for it, just like, years ago, I volunteered with the American Cancer Society, and somebody said to me, why is it that you got involved as a volunteer? I said, yeah, I've got a lot of people in my life that have had cancer, but, one day just somebody came up to me and said, hey, we'd really like to get you involved in this event. Would you be involved? And sometimes it's just as easy as asking somebody for their help.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the steps to a good testimonial. And this kind of builds off of what Jen was just talking about. So you obviously want to find the right patient, and that means a couple of things. One, especially if they're going to go on camera, you want them to, they can't be very shy. You want them to be personable and kind of likable right away. And then also, take a look at some of the procedures and things like that your docs want to focus on, and look for patients that might, fit that bill. So if you're down in a certain surgery or something like that, then find a patient that is willing to talk about the procedure that they just had. And the idea is that will drive more attention towards that particular procedure. You also want to have a disclaimer or a release form handy, and that's basically just saying, they sign that, and it says that you can use their image and their likeness in promoting, anywhere that you want.
And we'll have a sample release form with a disclaimer in the show notes for you to be able to download, and you can customize it for your practice too.
Yeah, and it's basically the one that we use for all of our clients. And often overlooked is how to make the patient comfortable. This is especially important with video testimonials. And normally what I do is I actually have a conversation with them first, and we'll run through the questions. And we're actually going to have the sample questions that we use up on the show notes as well. But I'll actually press record. Usually I don't tell them that, but then we'll talk through the questions first so they can kind of get their ducks in a row and figure out what they want to say. And just kind of make them feel at home. And that goes for written testimonials too. If you're going to approach them, you don't want them to feel awkward, and it's kind of weird to write about yourself. So just make sure that you do what you can in your power to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, because you'll be happier with the result that way. All right, and then just a couple of quick tips as far as editing and sound goes. Once you actually have your finished product, but before you even start filming, you want to pick a location. If you're going to do it outside, make sure that it's not too windy or there's not a lot of traffic around you, something like that. And then if you're going to do it indoors, make sure that you can find an empty part of the office, or do it after hours or before hours, so there's not doors banging and people using the restroom right next to you and toilets flushing in your sound and everything like that. And then as far as editing goes, it's really not that hard. There's a lot of software out there. If you're using a Mac, you have iMovie built right in, and you can use that and come up with a really good looking product. So, it's not really that hard. I think one of the biggest fears to overcome is actually just doing it. So, if you jump in, then, go head first, and then there's no looking back at that point.
All right, so a couple of ways that I just love to tell our story. I talked about kind of long form and using a video testimonial to create a written testimonial as part of a procedure. Corey and I love putting together printed newsletters with our evergreen content. A lot of people will tell you, hey, print's dead. But in a medical practice, I find that print is alive and well, especially if you're participating in health fairs and going out on doctor visits and visiting other offices and doing things in your community. You can take these great testimonials and these storytelling opportunities and put them together in a relatively inexpensive newsletter. And it's just a great way to cross-market your practice, and it'll save you some money on promotional products and things like that.
And on the other side of the spectrum, here's a couple examples of short content. And one thing I want to stress here is that in both the previous slide and this slide, we actually approached these pages and said, hey, would you guys be interested in doing a video that we can turn into this? Or would you help us out and write a couple sentences about your recent experience here? And it's very different from having the patient actually just willingly tell their story, because we didn't have to approach them at all. And we're going to talk about that in just a second.
All right, let's talk about letting others tell your story. Now, what I'm referring to here is not when you're getting a patient to sit down for a testimonial or writing an article. I'm talking about the stuff you don't even know about, when your patient takes it upon themselves to use that great networking and story spreading tool out there called Facebook or Google reviews or Twitter, and they're out there just saying great things, hopefully, or really nasty things about your practice. And this is more than ever bringing customer relationship management into the fold. And this is why it's so important to find those right brand advocates that are going to go out there and tell your story for you in a positive way.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to just be patients either. This slide is an example of, it's actually, we worked with a rep. It was for a total ankle replacement that one of the practices that we work with uses. And they actually, they were in the surgery and they knew the patient beforehand. And once it was done, they said, hey, would you mind if we turn this into an article about, how fast you got back to doing the things that you love to do? And so really the benefit for the practice was huge, and we didn't have to do anything. So there's when it works, letting others tell the story for you it's so much easier, and you get the same benefit.
Another way of kind of letting others tell the story, we have a group that we work with who is working very closely with a hospital partner. And the hospital partner in this example went out and found a patient testimonial from a head and neck cancer survivor, and he was prominent in the community. And he said, hey, I'll do a video. And the hospital put together a professional video. And then they went out there and they put it onto YouTube. And then we used, through the practice that we work with, we used what the hospital had done in order to spread it on all of the social media channels for them. But the fact is that the practice helped identify a patient for a testimonial, and then the hospital partner went out there and told the story for them with that patient. And this is the kind of content that just keeps giving and giving and giving. And it certainly has already led to new patients coming in because they saw this professional video that the hospital partner had put together.
All right, so now you're probably saying, yeah, this is all well and good, but how do I get started? So what can you do today to help patients tell your story? Here's 4 things. So number 1, we talked about this a few minutes ago. Identify the right patient. You want them to be likable and willing, and really talk about the procedure that you want to focus on. You don't have to just take everyone that says, yeah, I'd love to do a testimonial. Make sure that they make sense for your practice goals. Next, create an email or a flyer or a poster, something like that, to ask the patients for reviews.
Yeah, and if you check into the Doctor Marketing Tips member resource library, there are actually some samples that we have put in there, and one that you can download and edit and just pop your logo in and maybe change some copy. So we've made it super simple for you to actually go out there and ask your patients for those reviews. So there's no more excuses here.
Yeah, that's what we're all about. All right, and next is nominating some brand advocates. And what this is basically patients that are there essentially for other patients. They're going to tell their story and tell the story of your practice. We've actually seen it with Cochlear Group, and they do the cochlear implants for hearing. And what they do is they'll have their sales rep come in and they'll do like a Q&A or something like that after hours at one of the practices. They'll have a group of patients or interested potential patients come in, and then they also have their brand advocate come in. So the rep gives their presentation and goes through their slides and all that fun stuff. And then the brand advocate stands up and talks about how great life is now that he has this cochlear implant. Then he answers questions from the patient and this and that. And there's a real tangible kind of sense there that this is someone just like me, and it's beneficial if I do this, I can be just like him. Those kinds of things. All right, and the last tip I've got for you is to just get something scheduled and jump in. I mentioned that earlier, but I think it's something that really not really anybody does, and they should. Once you take that step and you get it scheduled, well, then you don't have a choice. So you have to make sure that you get the footage or get the testimonial and things like that. So the most important thing you can do is just get it on the calendar.
All right, so we know this is a lot of information, so let me do just a real quick review before we close it up. Plain and simple, patients can tell your story easier and better than ever, so you might as well help them. And there's so many different ways out there that they can share, whether it's through social media, whether it's through videos, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's at the grocery store. It doesn't matter. There's just so many ways. So the patient really is in control more than ever. And it's critical to use the sharing method that works best for you and for your practice. A lot of practices out there, Twitter doesn't work for them because they just don't understand how to use Twitter. But Facebook does work for them, and word of mouth does, because we all understand that process. So the key takeaway here is to let others tell your story. We all have a great story, and we're unique because of where we come from and the experiences that we have. And sometimes it's just a matter of asking that potential patient to help you spread the good stuff that's going on.
Next week, we're going to be talking about the lost art of relationship building. So with that, we want to thank you guys for taking a few minutes to hang out with us. And I'm Corey.
And I'm Jennifer.
And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.